Week 3 is upon us. It's time to do our ultimate rankings. Let's jump into the running back rankings for this week first, and let's start in the S tier with two guys here, Saquon Barkley and Bijan Robinson. Both of these guys are in games this week that have pretty high Vegas total points lines, and so you expect these guys to be productive. Not only that, you saw their floors last week in games where they don't really score touchdowns playing against each other. Each of them had about 15 points, and so we know that these guys are going to have super high floors. They're going to get the volume they need to do that, and then when they score touchdowns, you're talking about 25 to 30 point upside for each of these guys every single week, and so both these guys are going to be in the S tier until Christian McCaffrey comes back.
Yep, and at the A tier, I want to talk about Devon Achane specifically. We have him significantly higher than consensus projected rank, and that is going to be because there's a lot of uncertainty with Raheem Mostert, and is he going to play? Is he not going to play in week 3? We don't know yet, but at the end of the day, Devon Achane's upside and his ability to have explosive runs, explosive receptions, and the carries that he got without Raheem Mostert in that offense was just too good, too high to pass up on. He's got to be in this tier, I think, week in and week out until he proves otherwise, and he's healthy right now, so he's going to consistently be here. Alvin Kamara has found himself to be in this A tier and will be consistently until he also proves otherwise, and the Saints as an offense prove otherwise. I mean, they are on a historic pace right now, scoring 40 plus points in the first 2 weeks of the season. Derek Carr is slinging it, which is hilarious, and Alvin Kamara is reaping the benefits in the pass game and the run game. He still looks like he's 22 years old. This is a tier that, again, you just trust all of these guys to have a safe floor, not as high of a ceiling or upside as Bijan or Saquon. Maybe Alvin Kamara does, maybe Achane does, but look, all of these guys are going to be great this week. They're going to be totally fine.
Let's jump down to the B tier here, and this is where you're going to find Jordan Mason ranked while Christian McCaffrey's out. Top of the B tier, low into the A tier. They play the Rams this week. The Rams' run defense hasn't been near as good as it was last year, and so Jordan Mason's going to be at the top here for us, and he is a must-start every week, I think, while Christian McCaffrey's out. You've got James Cook here at 9. James Cook made a pretty big jump for us because the main thing we wanted to see from James Cook for the last 2 years was him get goal line carries. And he had not only goal line carries, but he had 3 touchdowns last week. That was more than he had in each of his first 2 seasons. So he's going to get a pretty big bump for us. And the other guy I wanted to highlight here was James Conner in a pretty high-scoring matchup against the Lions. I do think you're starting him every single week anyways, but this is going to be a lot of touchdown upside for him. Josh Jacobs also has a tough week here against the Titans, so we moved him down slightly. But all of these guys are guys you're starting in your fantasy leagues.
Yeah, in the C tier, you're going to have some lower floor starting running backs that are still really good, have high upside as well. ETN, Rachaad White, those types of guys. I want to talk about Ramondre and Aaron Jones specifically. Ramondre has, at face value, a tough-looking matchup against the Jets defense, right? Everyone fears the Jets defense. That's a lot more on the receiving side, and with the receiving assets in New England, there's not any right now. So I think the Jets are going to know that New England's going to want to run the ball and give Ramondre a lot of volume. So look, there's risk in Ramondre this week, but we're still going to rank him in this tier because I think he's going to be fine. All it's going to take is one goal line carry like it was against Seattle in week 2, and he's going to have double digits on the day. And then Aaron Jones, expect him to bounce back from a rough week against San Fran. Look, he was one goal line carry fumble away from being in double digits as well. It looked a lot worse on paper than it actually was. He was getting all of the important touches, all of the red zone opportunity. Ty Chandler, split carries with Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones always splits carries with everyone that he's in a backfield with since he came into the league. He's still Aaron Jones. Expect him to have a solid week against Houston in week 3.
In the D tier, we're going to start with B-Rob, and B-Rob has been somebody that you've really felt comfortable starting every week. This week, the Vegas total points line is 47.5, which is higher than I think you'd suspect. And so he's going to be a must start for us this week. Charbonnet, as long as Kenneth Walker's out, is also going to be somebody who I think you're really starting or flexing every week. Obviously, you would have liked to see more production from him last week, but I do think he is somebody moving forward as long as Kenneth Walker is out, which I think he will be this week. You start him. A couple other guys here that I want to highlight. Swift is playing the Colts this week. And anytime you have a running back playing the Colts, what we've seen in the first 2 weeks, Mixon ran all over the Colts. Jacobs ran all over the Colts. He fumbled the touchdown, but had he had the touchdown, he would have been 20 points. The Colts' run defense looks bad, and they just had DeForest Buckner go out with an injury, and he's probably not going to be playing next week, as well as Latu. And so Swift is a guy I'm absolutely starting this week in every freaking format. And then Dobbins, a lot of people are going to say, okay, why do you not have J.K. Dobbins higher? Have you seen what he's done? Yes, and on a normal basis, I would move J.K. Dobbins up at least a tier here because of what he's done early in the season. They have a really tough matchup. They have like one of the lowest total points lines of the week for with the Steelers at 37.5, and the Steelers have a pretty good run defense. So this is just a tough matchup for all of those players in the Chargers offense, but especially the running backs in Dobbins and Edwards. So yes, Dobbins will be ranked higher. This is his floor now, where we're going to rank him. So we're ranking him at his floor just because it's a really tough matchup this week.
Yep, and then in the F tier, I want to talk about Carson Steele and Samaje Perine. There's going to be so many questions about the Chiefs running backs. What are they going to do while Pacheco is out? It's anyone's guess at this point. I think a lot of people are going to go with the Carson Steele hype train and say that, he's going to get all of the carries, he's going to get all of the opportunity, he's going to be productive, and he very well could be. He has a really cool alligator. He's a local guy. It's Indianapolis, but as much as we're rooting for him and hope he does well, I think Perine has just as good a chance of being the lead back in that system for the foreseeable future. And from a production perspective, right? Perine isn't going to get all the carries. That's not what Perine does. But Perine is literally like Kansas City's new McKinnon. And you saw what McKinnon was able to do a couple of years ago during a stretch when they really needed him, and he went just off. He ended up being a league winner. I think Samaje Perine in his receiving capabilities has that upside and ability to potentially be a guy that you're flexing every single week and has just as likely of a chance as Carson Steele does of being that league winning running back who's replacing Isaiah Pacheco for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So want to keep an eye on both of these guys. We're going to rank them in the same tier because, again, it is anyone's guess who's going to get a majority of those opportunities. Like it could be Kareem Hunt in a couple weeks when he starts to, comes off the street and potentially signs with Kansas City. So just keep an eye on all of those guys. It's going to be interesting.
Let's go to the G tier, and these are all the guys that are going to be running back twos in their offense, highlighted by Austin Eckler, who's had a 10 and 11 points in his first couple weeks. He's probably, of the running back twos, the safest because he gets the receiving upside. He gets the receiving usage. Guys like Chuba Hubbard in a bad offense and a kind of a tough matchup. Jaylen Warren hasn't really done anything. Jeff Wilson, we have him here, assuming Achane plays, but Mostert does not. And so, but the thing is, Wilson didn't do anything last week, even with Mostert out. So that you have to consider that. Tyjae Spears, I think, could be ranked higher here pretty soon. But again, the Vegas line for that game is 38 this week, so probably not going to be a ton of touchdown upside with Tony Pollard there. And then Chase Brown. And Chase Brown is somebody that we were higher on, has a high Vegas line, has a good matchup, but he just hasn't gotten the usage to be productive yet. So all of these guys are backups. You're only flexing them if you can, but Austin Eckler is our favorite out of these guys.
Yeah, and then in the H tier, we just have more backup running backs. Braylon Allen at the top because he scored 2 touchdowns in week 2. That's not going to happen every single week, but want to recognize him. He is still playing behind Breece Hall, who is going to get 90% of the opportunities and the carries there. Guys like Gus Edwards, Rico Dowdle, Bucky Irving, Gibson, Justice Hill, even Ty Chandler, who again split carries with Aaron Jones in week 2. All these guys are rosterable, right? But unless you're desperate at running back, you're not starting any of them. They really are going to require an injury or like a breakaway run every single week to potentially be productive for you.
All right, let's jump over now to the wide receiver rankings for the week, and let's start in the S tier. 2 guys here. CeeDee Lamb is obvious. You're going to be putting CeeDee Lamb in the S tier your rankings every week. The other one's not so obvious. Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think a lot of people are going to advocate for him to be ranked lower because he did leave the field with an injury last week. As far as we know, it's not long-term. It's a contusion. He was also having some cramping from what we've heard. So I'm not super worried about Amon-Ra. He is one of the toughest guys in the league in terms of playing through injuries. And so I think Amon-Ra, even if he is hurt, he's going to play through it. And he usually looks fine. Most of the time he's injured, you don't even know. And so last week, he actually had a game over 20 points. You're seeing him come into his own now. That Lions offense has to get better. Jared Goff threw the ball a lot. And so I'm still starting Amon-Ra and still putting him up at the top of my rankings, even if he's injured right now.
Yeah, a couple of guys in the A tier have earned their A tier status, and that's going to start with Nico Collins. I think he's going to be in this tier consistently from here on out, and even in some positive matchups in future weeks, he's probably going to be in the S tier every once in a while as well. But look, he's clearly the top option there. I think we kind of whiffed a little bit on what Stephon Diggs was going to do there. He obviously had 2 touchdowns in week 1. That was against the Colts secondary. We knew that probably was going to come back, and Nico Collins just looked dominant for a second straight week. Expect him to be productive again in a matchup against the Vikings. That is going to be tougher. They do have a good defense, but I think Nico's going to be fine as a number 1 option there for Stroud. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. has a great bounce back week 2 after a rough debut where he only had like 3 targets and 1 catch. He goes off, goes bananas. He's going to have a good matchup again this week against the Detroit Lions. I think he's obviously has the upside to get 20 plus points again. I do want to talk about Jamar Chase. Everybody and their mom wants to sell Jamar Chase right now because he looks awful. The Bengals look awful in the first month of the season every single year under Zach Taylor. They cannot coach in the first month of the season. It drives me insane. And Jamar Chase is single-handedly the reason that Cincinnati lost that game against Kansas City last Sunday. He needs to freaking figure his crap out and get over the fact that he's not going to get paid more than $35 million a year. Like, just take the money, dude. But look, with Chase, he still has a matchup that we can't turn down, and that's the Washington Commanders. He's one of the few guys this week that has 4 green lights in our start-sit tool. He has the upside and the ability to go off this week. He just needs to freaking do it, and Joe Burrow needs to get him the ball. So, look, that's all I have to say about it, but keep an eye out for Jamar Chase this week. Don't sell him if you have him.
Let's move down to the B tier here. Let's start with Devonta Smith. And A.J. Brown's going to be out for a couple weeks, it looks like. And Devonta Smith last night without A.J. Brown had 20 points, including a touchdown that you saw at the back of the end zone. And so he's going to be ranked here at the top of the B tier. He'll be a top 12 start every single week. DJ Moore actually is getting a huge bump for us because he plays the Colts. The Colts suck. And the Colts, in terms of their secondary, one of the worst in the league, if not the worst in the league. And so you're starting DJ Moore. You're also bumping up Keenan Allen here later. But the rest of the guys in these tier are kind of the same. Devontae finally got some points last week and actually had some production. Mike Evans was more, kind of water finds its level. He didn't have a touchdown, so there you go. We did move Brandon Ayuk up quite a bit here because Deebo Samuel is out. And Brandon Ayuk hasn't done anything yet. He is going to have to do something for that offense.
Yep.
He has no choice. And so we are going to put him here at 13. You've got Rice. You've got Godwin, who continues to produce. And so we're going to rank Chris Godwin as a mid to high end wide receiver 2. Because he is a mid to high end wide receiver too. He is going to be consistent, steady the entire year, even with Mike Evans kind of going like crazy and then not, and crazy and then not. Godwin's going to get the amount of targets and the high quality targets, and when he has the touchdowns, again, his upside's kind of ridiculous. And then we've got Garrett Wilson with a very rough matchup, and you move him down a little bit because he hasn't done anything. He's playing the Patriots. He's probably going to have he's probably going to have Christian Gonzalez on him, and so we're going to move him down just a little bit this week. And then Malik Neighbors, a lot of people are going to say, Neighbors just had 18 targets. Why is he not higher for you? He is the only guy in our start-sit tool like this high that has all 4 reds this week. The bad matchup, bad Vegas, bad offense, all of it. And so this projects to be a low-scoring game for the Giants, 38.5. And the Browns are really good against receivers in fantasy football, really good. And so Neighbors is still a guy you're starting. Just keep in mind that Neighbors could lay an egg this week, and it wouldn't be because Neighbors is bad or because he's regressing or anything like that. It's just because it's a really tough matchup. And
they're going to make Daniel Jones suffer.
They absolutely will. And so nothing against Neighbors. Neighbors will be higher than this next week.
Yeah, and then in the C tier, this is a little baby tier again, very similar to what we had last week. Zay Flowers, Drake London, and Chris Olave, I think, are all clearly a step above all the receivers below this, and I think they're clearly a step below all of the guys that are ahead of them in the B tier as well. Zay Flowers, again, going to be very consistent with his target volume. He has some big play touchdown ability as well, but he just kind of gets his 15 to 20 points tops, and that's about it. And I think you're counting on that every single week. So he's going to pretty much find himself in this range consistently. And then Drake London was able to get a touchdown with Kirk Cousins on Monday night against Philadelphia. He was the lead wide receiver there, had 7 targets. That's great. I think if he can keep that going, he may be on the up in future weeks as well. And then Chris Olave has to find a way to get the ball in the end zone and has to find a way to get more targets and opportunity in an offense that's scoring 40 points. Like, Shaheed is just outperforming him right now. And we're going to continue to, rank Chris Olave well over other guys in this offense because he is the most talented and most capable guy there that a lot of defenses are going to be focusing on. He needs to transcend, and he needs to be able to be productive. And we're going to keep him in this tier because we trust him to do that against a Philadelphia secondary that just allowed a big play from Darnell Mooney and a touchdown from Drake London as well. They combined for like 35 points.
Yep. Let's jump down to the D tier here, and we'll start with Cooper. Cooper hasn't done anything yet, but he continues to get a really high target share. Against the Giants secondary, I would expect him to have a little bit of a bounce back week. We obviously move Waddle down into this tier with Tua being out. That's obviously a big hit for Waddle, and I feel like this is warranted because you see the splits without Tua for Waddle. They're really not good. He typically takes a pretty big hit. And so until Tua gets back, he's going to be ranked conservatively. You've got DK in this tier, and you've got JSN in this tier. DK, obviously the big play. JSN with 16 targets last week. Both of these guys can be fantasy productive, and I expect JSN to continue to get that target volume because he is on the field as the wide receiver 2 from a volume standpoint. So I think they're going to use him a lot. They're playing the Dolphins this week. That line's set at 42, a little bit lower with Tua out, but it's not anything to do with the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks get their own. I also think you have Jalen Ramsey probably take DK next week. So that will leave whoever their cornerback 2 is, I don't remember, on JSN. And then also in this tier, I will highlight Michael Pittman. And
he's just going to keep moving down.
He's just going to keep moving down. And this is not a Michael Pittman thing. It's an A-Rich thing, honestly. So
he's going to freaking figure it out.
And Diggs is in this tier, by the way. Diggs didn't do anything. I mean, he's going to kind of be boom or bust, I feel like, touchdown dependent. So
Yep. And then the top of the F tier, we're going to have JMO. Why would you not have JMO in a higher tier? He had 11 targets last week. That was awesome. Or 9 targets or something. He looked great. Again, he's eating into Sam Laporta's workload. It's a very crowded offense. A very, very crowded offense. So this is nothing against Jameson Williams. They have a good matchup against Arizona. Honestly, if you wanted to put him in the next tier above, you totally could. I wouldn't have an issue with it. But look, we got to break up our tiers, and JMO is still going to be in this range every single week because Amon-Ra is going to continue to command 15 to 20 targets a game. And then you've got other guys like Brian Thomas Jr., who kind of had a rough go at it against Cleveland last week. And I think he'll be okay in a matchup against Buffalo, but it's probably going to be rough again. So we'll see with him. Keenan Allen, we bumped up a little bit because he's got the Colts matchup. And then again, Tank Dell, just a tier below Stephon Diggs. I think at this point, Tank Dell not getting like hardly any opportunity at all against Chicago was really, really concerning when we've, advocated for him as a buy, advocated for him as a start, thought he'd have a bounce back week. He's got to do something or he's going to continue to fall down our rankings as well.
Let's go to the G tier, and let's start with Rashid Shaheed. He comes into the week as the wide receiver 9 on the season. And yeah, you're like, this isn't sustainable. I know. It's not sustainable. We'd be the first to tell you that. But he does go into a matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah. And the Eagles gave up the most points to wide receivers in fantasy football last year. And so far this year, they've done more of the same. And so for Shaheed, I expect him to have another big week 3. Obviously, you could see him get like 5 to 7 points if he doesn't have that touchdown. I'm essentially betting here that he gets that touchdown again, that he still produces. When you're talking about his production so far this year, he has had 5 and 4 targets, which isn't great. He's only playing about 65 to 70% of snaps, which isn't great. But the yardage and the touchdowns is what you've seen. 24 yards per catch in each of his first 2 games. That should tell you all you need to know. I'm betting on the big playability, but this isn't that big of a bet. I'm ranking him as the wide receiver 36 here. That's not a huge bet. So again, he's somebody I think I'm considering flexing for the boom bust upside. I will highlight Judy. Him and Deshaun Watson have shown some chemistry, and Judy has had 11 and 12 points in his first 2 games, and he's gotten a pretty good amount of targets as well, about 7 per game right now. And then the 3 guys here, Kirk, Johnson, and Shakir, obviously all wide receiver ones in their offense you just don't feel super good about right now, so you're considering flexing them this week.
Yeah, and then it's the top of the H tier. Demarcus Robinson has found himself in these rankings because he is just the next man up. Tyler Johnson, Jordan Whittington, Tutu Atwell are the next men up. Like, oh my gosh, the poor Rams. They got to find a way to stop the bleeding, literally. Everyone on that team is dying. I feel bad for them. They look like the 2022 Rams all over again. But Demarcus Robinson is not a guy that we're super excited about or optimistic about this week against San Fran. It's probably going to take a big play. They are probably going to be running the ball. Like, it's just a tough matchup altogether. You got 2 teams that are struggling with a bunch of injuries right now, division rivals. It's going to be a rough one. It's going to be a rough go. Ladd McConkey playing Pittsburgh. I want to highlight him as well. He was kind of outdone by Quentin Johnson, which no one saw coming in week 2, but he's got another rough matchup against Pittsburgh this week. Ramo Dunze hasn't done anything. He's still in these rankings because he's playing the Colts. So all the rest of these guys, I don't know why there's so many high expectations for Cortland Sutton this week when you're looking at his projections across the board. The dude hasn't done anything. Yeah, he's commanded targets. He hasn't turned him into anything. Like, seriously, I'd rather have Josh Reynolds. So, honestly, this is just a bunch of guys that if you're desperate at wide receiver, really short at wide receiver because of injuries, these are some guys. These are how we rank them if you have to throw them into your flex, but not too many guys in this range that I'm really excited about.
All right, let's move now to our tight end rankings, and let's start in the S tier. Trey McBride, all 4 green lights this week. He projects to have a really good matchup against the Lions, high Vegas line. You feel really good about ranking him here. Sam Laporta, this bounce back game, right? This is going to be the game Sam Laporta actually does his thing. Kittle with no Debo is going to be extremely productive. He's 17 points last game. You expect more of the same against the Rams and what should be, again, another high-scoring matchup. Maybe not as high-scoring as people would think because the 49ers are missing McCaffrey and Debo, but Kittle is going to get a ton of that work. Bowers is a guy you're starting every single week now, no matter what. You saw him, I think, had 9 targets, maybe 10 targets in this last game.
And he's still
won me my week.
Not even on the field that much.
I mean, and there's so much room for it. He has not even scored a touchdown yet. Yeah. He's still not on the field a ton because the Raiders aren't running a ton of 12 personnel. But 9 of 9 in terms of targets and receptions last week. He has 17 total targets on the year. This is a guy I'm super excited about, honestly.
Yep.
And I think you're starting him every week, no matter what at this point. And so all these guys are in the S tier as guys, like no matter who you have in your roster, you're starting these guys.
Yeah, and then we got Travis Kelce and Kyle Pitts in a little baby tier here in the A tier. I think both of them have significant upside because they are really significant options in their offense. And they've both had some kind of, well, Travis Kelce really has had a rough start, which is why he's out of the S tier this week. He's got to show that he can be a little more productive. Kyle Pitts, we don't know. He was productive week 1, wasn't productive at all week 2. Is it going to be an in-between? Is it going to be hit or miss all year? Not really sure. It is really disgusting at tight. It's even more disgusting at tight end this year than it has been in the last couple of years, and we thought it was gross then. So I think there's a clear drop after this too, which is why I couldn't even put Andrews in the A tier. Like
no, and I think he'll be the top of the guy in the B tier here. He's going to be ranked 7th for us. And going into a matchup this week with the Cowboys, again, he did outproduce likely, out-target likely last week, so I think you see more of that. We'll have him ranked well above likely this week because I think he is going to kind of emerge as the tight end 1 again, which is, what kind of we expected. But definitely putting him at the top of the B tier. Evan Ingram would be in this tier, but he's actually out, so we're not going to put him in our rankings. And so that kind of bumps up guys like Kincaid, who hasn't really done much yet, but you did see the Bills try to get him involved in the game script at the beginning of the game last week. You do like that. That game kind of just went off the rails because James Cook went nuts and they didn't really pass the ball after that. So still like Kincaid. Goddard is in here as well. Goddard has been fairly productive, and Hunter Henry actually has been somebody that in Hunter Henry's in the next year. I'll go with Goddard again. And Dallas Goedert's been fairly productive, but you're still not feeling super good about it. The one thing with Goddard is AJ Brown is out, and so you feel a little bit better about starting him over the guys in the next tier.
Yeah, Hunter Henry's going to be at the top of this tier. He had a lot of targets. This is a classic Henry. This is a classic Henry Hunter game where he, gets a ton of targets. Everyone's excited. He's a really hot waiver pickup, and then he doesn't do anything. He's going to have some boom games like this. This is what he's done in New England for the last couple of years. And I need to see it for multiple weeks for me to move him up significantly, for Avery and I to move him up significantly in our rankings. And then other guys like Colby Parkinson, next man up, right? No Puka, no Cooper Kupp for the foreseeable future. Isaiah Likely kind of back to earth. He fell down our rankings a bit. Any given week, he could, have a big play, have a touchdown, something like that. Andrews looks continually slow. Like Isaiah Likely could still be the second option there. And then Mike Gesicki had a productive week and a good offense in Cincinnati. That's, not great to begin the season, but he did get like 9 targets and a lot of yards. So he has always been a tight end receiving specialist specifically. He's not a guy that you want to block with. So he's going to be in there lining up as a receiver quite a bit. And while Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are not themselves, Gesicki's going to be getting some opportunities there. So.
And then you've got the last 2 tiers here. You've got, Taysom Hill and Juwan Johnson, the Saints guys in the D tier, and then the F tier, guys you really don't want to start unless you're playing in like a really deep tight end league. You're having to start 2 tight ends or something like that. So that's going to be the full tight end rankings for the week. All right, we're going to finish up with our quarterback rankings for the week. Let's go. In the S tier, we're going to have 4 guys in this tier: Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Kyler, and Jalen Hurts. All these guys have fairly good matchups. The lowest one here is 47 points, and that's going to be Josh Allen. All these guys have really high Vegas lines. All of these guys have rushing upside. These are guys I think you're going to be starting every single week. These guys look like the premier quarterbacks for fantasy football this year. They're going to be in the S tier most weeks now, but all these guys have good matchups and high rushing upside this week.
All right, it's week 3. Which Anthony Richardson are we going to see against Chicago? I don't know. Anyone's guess. 9-point AR or 30-point AR? It is up to you. You're starting Anthony Richardson every single week because of his upside. It's ridiculous. Jaden Daniels had a rough week last week as well, but you're still starting guys like Jaden Daniels. So look, with Anthony Richardson, I wanted to highlight him in this tier because I think last week was disgusting across the board. I think it was a poorly called game on both sides of the ball with the coaching, and Mahomes will be in this tier as well with CJ Stroud too. They're 2 premier passers that are consistently going to be here. Again, get used to this kind of snapshot with the S and the A tier. You're probably going to see some sort of combination depending on matchup and situation every single week with these QBs.
Goff highlights the B tier. They has a good matchup against the Cardinals this week. You've got Burrow in this tier. Jaden Daniels obviously has the rushing upside. And then you've got Purdy and Mayfield. Purdy, I think, gets a little bit of a decrease because he's missing a lot of his weapons. Baker, most of the time he's going to get a pretty good bump from us, but that line for this week is set at 40.5 for that game. And so it might be a lower scoring game. He threw less touchdowns last week, and so that might be more of the norm for Baker.
Derek Carr moved up significantly in week 3 because of the matchup, and he's been leading his offense to 40 points a week. So there's a decent amount of upside there. Yeah, Derek Carr is very limited. He doesn't have any rushing upside. It's all going to be dependent on how many touchdowns he throws, all of his yardage and whatnot. But he's going to be at the top this week because he has a really, really friendly matchup with a decent Vegas line as well at 48.5. And then other guys like Dak Prescott, Matt Stafford. Honestly, Matt Stafford is going to fall down our rankings a bit compared to where we had him in previous weeks because he doesn't have any receivers to throw the ball to anymore. It's going to be really, really ugly in LA. Can expect him to probably continue to fall down our rankings over the next couple of weeks. We just don't want to jump the gun yet. And then Caleb Williams will also be in this tier because he's playing the Colts. You're going to go from everybody being a downer on Caleb Williams last week to saying that Caleb Williams is going to be MVP after playing the Colts in week 3. He's going to look amazing. Get ready for it.
Let's go to the D tier. The guy I'll highlight here is Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins looked better last week. The Falcons looked better, and so he's got the highest Vegas line of anybody in this group. Herbert has a particularly bad matchup, so those guys are going to be kind of contrasts in this D tier.
Yeah, and then the F tier is just ugly. Aaron Rodgers is kind of a shell of what he used to be, it seems like, from a production perspective, but he'll still, have a decent floor. And then guys like Minshew, Fields, Levis, who have some rushing upside there, and then Darnold as well going against Houston, who's shown that he's a competent quarterback, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then the last tier here, you can take a look at it yourself. But there you go. Those are our ultimate rankings for the week. Do us a huge favor if you enjoy the ultimate rankings format. Make sure you drop a like on this video so we know, and make sure you're subscribed so you can get this every single week when it comes out. This should help you win your fantasy football matchups. We have a lot of research that goes into making these rankings, so we appreciate it if you do those things for us, like and subscribe. Get a team blueprint at flockfantasy.com/domain. You get 30% off when you use code domain, the entire site, and you get a free team blueprint when you use the code domain and sign up for the annual tier. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you later.